Hello, America. Hello, America. I put a link in this video. This is regarding January 6th, but it's regarding the World Trade Centers Act. There are predicate acts and predicate acts methods recorded that conscious uses of criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments where truths can be and are used and were used as lies, not legitimately have political readings of statutes where they have the right to lie about other political opponents. Note this is also as unions. These are people involved with union thefts through the union leaderships, through where they have everyone and speaking through others, where and how our agencies failed originally and still to explain where and how the breaching method implied other than what nature communicates, for example, with black people's rights of eyes, with where and how we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. And or where there are cases where both were the same exceptions and exception nature is demonstrated. Other species bodies have two eyes. So there was a guy associated with the January 6th attack on the Capitol and treatments of it by the news, because CNN has sources on and off Central Connecticut State University through administrations involved with the United States military used criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions raw, and where and how the interbranch is getting involved with other people's communications dishonestly. And they have interbranch, they have passion crimes with Hartford courts and the Britain courts before the World Trade Center attack. They were involved with predicate acts, planting evidences intercities, with people intimately tied to them and their family members. Like, for example, Eric Burgess is one of the people I never saw on the campus of Central Connecticut State University in my life. And I did not respond to the confessions. They said it was a son of a Dean Judd. There were also a whole bunch of people tied to a Dean Alford, who's involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and co-defendants of his, and their deposition, roles with their deposition. Hartford courts and the Britain courts have been planting evidences with them. And before, usually when someone is suing a former director of the FBI, it's from in prison. This is a civil RICO case. And he was a defendant. His co-defendants, like a Thaddeus Grabowski and a John McConch, are about involved with a whole bunch of people next to the state capitol who have the intelligence community take pictures of people next to others and they pretend they know them, like a Chuck Casper and an Anthony Agman. Anthony Agman I did have one class with him, never had a word of conversation with him. The other people in that class were also involved with names in my area, planting evidences. And then again, when I caught them with a principal child abuser, these are also people with Sandy Hook, people with the name O'Brien, sought me out as strangers made fake exceptions. Also, there's a Joshua Julian, I know they had his name repeated to me by the people, a whole bunch of people on and off Hartford Hospital and other medical locations involved with a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and the house and the names next to those campuses. Note that fire medical campuses are also campuses. And the difference between private and public schools. And they're lying about their motivations relative to how they got away with pretending passions and emotions by anyone was honest about science. Sciences are abridged. We're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged. This guy's planting fake motivations, regardless if he's a cop or not. I don't know if he is or not. The guy who's the source of, guy involved with CNN they have roles with the intelligence community on all sides of Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, that through time has been planting, has names at other campuses and that names that live next to campuses, who are repeating conversations where they're going to make up and leave out finite and group details, and actually what is simultaneously capable of their discernment and of others, where the descriptions of things are being used criminally foreign influence. So this guy's describing how the mind works, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions rot. Too, there are recorded proofs that his doctor is involved with it. Mental health mental health experts have been tactically delusions rot since before our founders were born. Never went away because we have not addressed where and how the economy was employed to keep criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and or negative treatments, and or roles with uses of syntactically the difference of that, where and how effectively measured and maintained, left out by all identities of logic, is the breaching method's roles with our syntax. So this guy with the January 6th is in the furtherance of where truths are used to lie by our experts because they're used to locations too. And the difference between that overt criminal enterprises, private ones, all sides in criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, the victims and the victims' advocates used to plant fake things in databases as collusion with crime scenes. Way worse than they're even addressing. And they've allowed it address because they're putting fake mail crime methods, wire crime methods. They're pretending people are making conspiracy theories. They've been getting away with it because they have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes that CNN knows about, but they're leaving out the exceptions, which don't give them the right to get away with that. That's why we have to follow what is actually recorded, and we have to break free from the collusions between the tactically delusions wrought guy who's pretending that America was forged relative to a dictatorship when it stayed a dictatorship. In other words, we stayed a bridge. We're not supposed to make economic treatments, leaving out how and why our founders had to extort the other, counter extort the other founders, and how they were capable of that because the breaching method of the fact genie nature slavery against everyone sickly distinctly, because it effectively employed too. Functionally, how sickly non-distinctly is left out. It's better than positive. It's positive how we're all the victim of the same semi-ancient abridged sciences and uses of that pretend other. Integrity never spoke for what was behind each war. For too long, they had weapons pointed at each other and means to stack positives way better than, the suburbs were designed before our founders were born. We have means to stack positive, the tactically denatured identity, the grounds identity, relationship to itself. Do you watch boxing or just shadow boxing? I had a bunch of fights. I had like almost 70 fights in my book, and I used to fight all over New England. I even go to Massachusetts to fight sparring too. So I have like hundreds of fights if you count sparring too. But then before the World Trade Center attack, I didn't know it involved former director of the FBI yet, but I knew that there were courts involved and there were foreign and domestic military involved. My Saudi girlfriend, they forced her to collusion with courts and with the FBI, with other police forms, reported also grouped predicate acts methods. Predicate acts like mail crimes and wire crimes, also with the news at the same time to prevent voices. There were also maintenance to other things, others ourselves being blamed for where and how our founders communicated for us to blame as a breaching method. They have our founders pretended to have had roles with slavery, which is where and how, for example, simultaneously it is relevant. I mean, it's increasing relative too. No. Math is all about how there is an identity of relativity, but they assign math to be involved with logic and therefore descriptions of logic. And logic and reason uses difference and it uses value and identity and names, therefore tactical ulterior from how math could appreciate. I mean, it really uses it ways greater than and more finite than distinctly, while as the way that math works. But it works in ways greater than and more finite than. And active, tactical ulterior from how math is. For example, it will only stay positive unto itself, to all parts of space/existence simultaneously, the same way the identity is, because to an extent, every identity can't be an identity unless we're in its way. We could be and stay systems made tactical ulterior in some ancient times, but nature will continue to demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, acts like predicate acts, natures like criminal insidiousness natures. So the news has roles planting evidences online that are specifically to have them measured and maintained, already having had them measured and maintained. Our prosecutors and judges and lawyers self-fighted collusions with readings of statutes criminally foreign influence For example, at Elm Streets in Rocky Hill and Weathersfield, there are people involved with Russians who are simultaneously involved with Ukrainians and American, and their difference is one of the things being used to hide behind. When people bring up wars and the value of people's service, they do it dishonestly. Only in other words, where and how that is relative to where and how other things, others ourselves haven't been blamed for the real causes of negative attitude progression. Acts of nature like the roles with slavery and witch trials, even if the witch trials were made up, regardless of who made them up. We're not supposed to leave this out from why and how George Washington had to counter extort roles with slavery. He also had to leave entrenched north and south in that Weathersfield, Connecticut, right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. So there's this guy. I was the guy with the horns on his head. I don't know his name. And he's associated with Stephen Gardner, I believe. I put the link in my description. And the rest of that, where I've said things clear in my description of my videos, and where I say things counter-obfuscated, / counter-hyper-obfuscated. Because no, the World Trade Center, World Trade agreements have roles with things that can't be defended, and integrity of logic and ethics at the same time. So they get away with where in this breaching method knew that people were going to speak for the law and ethics anyway, as roles with really what caused and keeps as the breaching method. The worst cause in roles, with even when there's real other things and names. It's the streams of people going into courts every day. Having gone into courts, because when they act as knaves, they leave out details, make details up, value that haven't been, they're increasingly valuing that haven't been. That's increasingly incapable of identities of law with description of their value, incapable of defending that, of affording the short words proper to communicate for our founders, let alone their protraction. Oh, well, what's your evidence? There are ways to say that criminally foreign influence. That's one of the things our founders left us to demonstrate and understand. So we have to have the fake words attached to me by WFSB strictly distinctly from the other networks. WTNH attached me to fake emails, and it's nothing personal. I can't call them because of the wire crime methods being used by WFSB and the fake emails. I want to keep it clear because they're putting fake communications with me. They're changing communications platforms. I caught them with those contexts where they have child abusers, leaders of the kids forced, and they're pretending it's only about that. They have more roles with the police forms, with the schools. They're demonstrating they have the training of little kids when they're little, and rights to lie when they're little, pretended legitimate. They're criminally foreign influence use of identity ground location, planting fake motivations for lies, even time. Identity theft, fraud, slander is one of the things that is manifest, 3 ways manifest, because of sickly how non-distinctly our founders are fact-cheap in nature enslaved, blamed for slavery, readings of statutes that left out all that's actually recorded. So it's very serious where and how our formal identities of the law and of the sciences, most knowledge of good and evil know, to use a phrase from the Bible. The people that defend the Bible with the most knowledge of good and evil about the Bible, and the people who defend the Quran with the most knowledge of good and evil about the Quran, they're hiding and keeping it not realized from everyone the value of the first part of the parts of both the Quran and the Old Testament, where the first part of the Quran says all that someone needs to read about. All says you don't have to do anything else if you don't believe it. You're not supposed to play in a mosque. If for some reason you sense it, all they have to do is either call the identity the hyper-simultaneous, which I'm translating. I only read the English translation of the Quran. But this hyper-simultaneous, which nature shows us, that's one of the things that being a species is, a sequence / simultaneous nature. And other species bodies, they have two eyes too. There isn't a hyper additional identity of simultaneous nature that reveals everything this way. We only have to agree to call that name or not, honestly. And the Quran says, don't hurt people and force them to agree to it. It says it will kill them if they change their mind. So they're trying to defend archaeological evidence reception on not criminally foreign influence before anyone formally allowed to deal with evidences is free. And while they're pretending other for the breaching method, while they're tactically criminally foreign influence. Quote, criminally foreign influence, because this is a predicate acts delivery system method. This is a criminal insidiousness delivery system method that American history is about, that each modern country's history is about. We have suits and ties and counters to it that can't defend their identities or logic and afford discern the answer. So it's a serious problem with people pretending that they're legitimately describing America relative to a contrast to a king. They're using truths for lies, the way the breaching method forced everyone, because we can measure and maintain who's not roles with that self-value used remotely. Self-value there for names uses, identity uses. So follow mandated law for the people who are supposed to follow it on time and correctly with care. They have state collusion. Excuse me.